Shop the Sherwin-Williams 4th of July sale and get 30% off paints and stains June 27th through July 7th. With prices starting at $34.29, it's the perfect time to transform your space with color. Whether you're looking to revamp your interior or exterior, we have you covered with bold hues, soothing neutrals, and everything in between. Visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store or shop the sale online. Delivery available on qualifying orders. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.
Welcome again to the Explaining History podcast, and I'm very pleased to welcome Nicola Wilson to the podcast today to talk about her new book, The Book Society, which is a history of a kind of a really fascinating moment in the interwar period of this explosion in readership and in mass publishing and in all these kinds of things that brought a kind of the paperback essentially to a wider audience. And also this is a kind of almost a story of the kind of the first celebrity influencers who were able to recommend and suggest new books to this burgeoning market of readers. I think I've done it, hopefully done it a little bit of justice there, Nicola. But
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yes, and the book is called Recommended. And yes, as you said, it's a history of the Book Society, which was the first celebrity book club in the UK. So they set up in late 1928, 1929. It was based on the American Book of the Month Club, which some of your listeners might be aware of. So that's better known. That was set up in 1926. And the idea of the Book Society was to send members, readers, one book every month. So you had to commit to buying 12 books a year. And you received first edition hardbacks through the post. So it was part of the publisher's first print run, first edition. So potentially kind of collectible books as well that you're receiving. And they had a huge influence on taste and sales. They had 10,000 members by the early 1930s, and bookshops and libraries would also kind of look at their recommendations and the Book Society choice. And because of empire and kind of global distribution, it really spreads the kind of chosen texts kind of around the English language speaking world. And they went on till the end of the 60s, wow. 1968, yeah.
There's something fascinating about this period of time. You mentioned taste, and I think that's a really, really important thing. In that there seems to be a body of middle class and working class people that are looking to acquire not just taste in the kind of the conventional sense, but almost like intellectual taste. This kind of to be armed with what was thought to be the important ideas of the day. There was a book the other year about working class autodidacts, about the intellectual life. I forget.
Jonathan Rose. Yeah,
that's the one. That's the one.
Yeah.
And I think it says more about our time than theirs. But you hear about essentially, working class sort of cleaners reading like Marx and Freud and Schopenhauer and all this sort of stuff, and you think, it's quite remarkable, but it's a shame that it is remarkable, that we find it remarkable.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, in another life, I've done work on Ethel Carney Holdsworth, who was a Lancashire Mill Girl novelist, and she talks about getting books from the cooperative lending library and this kind of, she left school at 11, but this really like literate kind of reading society that she's part of. But yeah, it's really heated debate, so taste. So yeah, that kind of working class, low middle class public that you mentioned. It's called there was a lecture from 1928 calling them the new reading public, and it's this idea of people who've kind of benefited from the 1870 Education Act. You've got more people reading, more people wanting to read, um, and the Book Society is kind of set up to give those that kind of new reading audience suggestions really of what they might want to read, because also this is before you've got lots of people kind of going to universities or getting a shape like a sense of what literary kind of classics is, or like Alan Bennett wrote a book called Literary Taste and How to Form It, and also gave advice on like building a library and things you might want to collect. So there's a lot of educational kind of things going
Is there,
on.
I was going to say, is there an element of like kind of patrician sort of the imparting of knowledge from in a patrician kind of dynamic from the sort of the educated and the well-to-do down to the poorer, to kind of give them the right, in the same way that the BBC was meant to sort of educate and inform.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Hugh Walpole, who was head of the selection committee, talks about this idea of the book society is for the man in his line is the man in the street. It's the man, of its age, the man in the street plus a little culture. And it's the idea actually that books and reading should be kind of for everybody, but that they're generally still the kind of privilege of a kind of small elite of readers. And the Book Society's idea is that that's not really how things should be. So it's tricky. I mean, they're not doing cheap reprints. They're not kind of going to a lower price point like the American Book of the Month Club did. But it's still a shift. So at the time, actually, they were really criticised by some critics for this idea of like dumbing down what literature was, and they were called like middlemen. So that's like a terrible thing to kind of intervene between authors and readers. But there were others. So there was a writer called Margaret Cole, who was a socialist, and she kind of talked about how they were revolutionizing the book world and just making things a bit more accessible.
Yeah.
To get hold of as well, because at this time, like most people aren't buying books as well in the 30s. It's you'd kind of belong to a circulating library like Boots or WH Smith's if you had a bit of cash, or you'd borrow books from cooperative or kind of a working man's kind of library. So it's also about encouraging people who do have enough money to spare to spend it on books.
Yeah, and a book is probably during the 1930s at the very least quite a luxury, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so the Book Society's price point, so they're sending out full price books, so between 7 and 6, which was your typical price of fiction, up to 10 and 6, which was biography or histories, and that's about £25 today equivalent. So it's and committing to do that every month is kind of quite a lot.
Yeah. And this is the era of, I mean, again, this is the era of mass publishing. People like Philip Allen kind of emerge at this point with kind of pocket paperbacks. Is it partly to do with like innovations in, say, printing technology, the fact that you can now print on this scale and create large numbers of books?
Yeah, I think that's got something to do with it. So paperbacks with Penguin, that's kind of 1935, but they don't really take off for mass audiences till after the Second World War, when it's more, posting. I think the Second World War, again, you got the kind of huge increase in reading. So that's something to do with it, I think. But I think also, just going back to the point about taste, so the Book Society judges have this, they call themselves broad brows. So rather than kind of high brows or low brows, they're broad, and they're trying to cater for a wider sense of taste. And the key thing about their books was they were meant to be kind of entertaining and worthwhile, so worth spending money and time on. So not necessarily like really kind of light genre fiction, or kind of perhaps some things you might think about book club choices now. So they were quite like one month you might get a biography of Napoleon, or a history, or travel writing, non-fiction, as well as fiction. So they were really kind of broad and yeah, going back to what you're saying about readers, they're asking quite a lot of readers as well. It's yeah.
There was a fascinating chat I did in the podcast a few weeks ago with Tom Lutz, all about it was a literary history of the year 1925 in America.
Mm.
And he talked a lot about the idea of the kind of the focus on betterment in America, that
Right.
people would read to better themselves in a kind of a very kind of cutthroat kind of capitalist sort of learn the things you need to do to be kind of a more commercial individual. The origins of self-help kind of emerge, self-help books kind of emerge around that time. But I wonder, is there when people are signing up to the book clubs, you have these kind of patrician characters saying, this is for to kind of elevate culturally ordinary people. But is that how it's received? Are people going, yes, I'm looking to improve myself?
I mean, I think people would have been members for different reasons. So certainly some of the advertisements share that idea. There's one called like it's basically it's kind of the language of like you're investing in yourself and your children by creating this like fantastic library of new first edition hardbacks. So I think there is definitely an element of that. And going back to the point as well about the BBC and yeah, self-improvement education's a really big part of it. But also I think the club is engaging with some of the debates around modernism as well, which was seen as being kind of very difficult literary writing that wasn't kind of for everybody. So there's a big pushback against that, and saying that actually there's a lot more writers out there and you shouldn't feel stupid or kind of put off by contemporary writing because there's other things you might be interested in. But while I've been working on the project in terms of like particular readers, I've heard from a few kind of families with book collections where they've kind of unearthed all these kind of book society books, because they sent out, you received like a book plate along with your monthly book and a monthly magazine. So there's this like personalized collections. And it looks like they had members in kind of Canada, Tanzania. There's one relative who reached out. So her grandparents were based in India. They were in the jute industry, Scottish family. And they had one of these books sent every month for kind of 20 years, from the 30s to the 50s. And then the collection has come back with them. So there's like a full collection of 400 books.
Wow.
So it's really amazing, because it's like a lifetime's reading, and they've personalized the collection with the book plates and numbered the spine. So you think that idea of investing time and money in this collection and like a process of a reading life as well is kind of interesting, I think.
Yeah. And who were I mean, you've talked about Hugh Walpole, but who were the kind of the key figures in the Book Society?
Yeah, so I got really interested in the lives of the judges as I was doing the book, and actually the book is mainly really a story of their lives and how what is going on at home or domestically kind of influences what they're reading, and then kind of choosing to send out to members. But yeah, so Hugh Walpole is the chair until his death in 1941. He was a best-selling writer. He was knighted for services to literature in 1937, so kind of quite a significant person at the time. And he was also really involved in the book world. So he also set up something called the Society of Bookmen, which was like a trade association to bring together authors, publishers, and bookshops. So he was really invested in the idea of kind of both boosting reading and helping debut authors. So he's really fascinating. J.B. Priestley was involved at the beginning. He was friends with Walpole. He left and then kind of came back and steered the club through and after the Second World War.
Right.
There was a token academic, so George Stuart Gordon, who was based initially in Edinburgh, and then he was Vice Chancellor of Oxford through the Second World War years. He's Oh, it looks like he didn't actually get much reading done. So mainly at the meetings, you hear about what his wife thinks about some of the books that has been sent. But he's an interesting one. And then there were two women writers, Clement Stane, who was a dramatist, friends with Noel Howard. She left for Hollywood. She went into kind of script writing at the end of the 30s. And someone who I've got really interested in is a woman called Sylvia Lynd. So she lived in Hampstead. So and was married to Robert Lynd, who's a journalist. But
Oh
she
yeah.
was a professional writer in her own right. So she was a novelist and a poet, but she also did a lot of kind of committee work within literature. She was on prizes as well. But you can see so there were five judges, 5 votes for choices, and it looks like Sylvia Lynd was someone who behind the scenes like really steered the choices and was kind of quite a powerful, dominating voice in the committee. And then in the 30s, as things shift a little bit and First Priestley leaves, they bring in Edmund Blunden, who was a poet from the First World War.
Oh yes.
He's really interesting. So he was a pacifist and absolutely wants to avoid a Second World War. And at the end of the 30s, 1937, they bring on Cecil Day Lewis, so the 30s poet who's part of the Popular Front, very much kind of campaigning against the rise of fascism. And what I kind of do in the book is trace some of the debates between Blunden and Day Lewis and how their totally different kind of standpoints on appeasement are reflected through the Book Society's journal and some of the things that are being recommended as they're trying to help, I guess, readers navigate kind of global politics and what's going on.
And in a way, I mean,
this summer, Instacart is bringing back your favorites from 1999 with prices from 1999. That means 90s prices on juice pouches that ought to be respected, 90s prices on boxed mac and cheese, and 90s prices on ham, cheese, and cracker lunches. Enjoy all those throwbacks and more at throwback prices. Only through Instacart. $4.72 maximum discount per $10 of eligible items. Limit 1 offer per order. Expires September 5th while supplies last. Discount based on CPI comparison.
It's kind of a sort of like it's a very progressive, very democratic ethos, and one which, I mean, if it exists in the world at the moment, I mean, no doubt exists on kind of some sort of online forum or YouTube or Substack or something like that. But the idea that the purpose of something like that was to help people navigate these kind of ideas, I think is really, I would say, really ahead of its time. I might be wrong. It might be that there are earlier versions of this, but it seems really, really forward thinking for the day.
Yeah, and I think because I was writing some of this book during COVID, where there was a massive boost in subscription, well, book clubs and generally subscription packages, and the idea of people receiving like treats or something every month, that's yeah, I mean, I think the Book Society, kind of they kept the distribution going through the Second World War. They reduced from 12 books to 10 once paper shortages hit and they've got wider problems in the publishing industry, but they managed to keep up that level of kind of connection. And I think going through COVID did help me to think a bit more about what it might have been like to receive something regularly through the post, especially if you're based overseas or far away from home.
Was it similar in a way to Victor Gollancz's Left Book Club, or is that sort of a different kind of thing?
Yeah, so the Left Book Club is just a little bit later, so that's kind of end of the 30s.
Yeah.
And they were doing cheaper books, some reprints, some new works, but the price point was different. And that was more of that had like it was a mass organ. I think it was like almost hundreds of thousand members. That was like a really mass organization. It's similar but different, I would say. So the price point is different for one thing, and also the Book Society is not a political club in the same way that the Left Book Club was, or the Right Book Club, which was set up by Foyles as a kind of counter to the leftist choices. So, but it's still navigating that really complex political world. And I think that's specifically why they bring in Day Lewis in some ways as well, because what they're doing in their monthly magazine, so you would get a monthly choice that the judges have selected for you, but they also recommend 12 or so other titles. And the idea was you could exchange the choice if you didn't like the look of it for something else. So the politics is definitely there, and it gets more so during the Second World War. But they're trying to keep. They recommend some of the, say, Right Book Club's choices, which are coming from London, as well as the Day Lewis choices. So unlike the Gollancz Book Club, where you kind of getting one sense of how the world works, I think they're trying to keep it a little bit more open in that sense.
Right.
Slightly less technical.
And with that, I mean, we talked about the sort of like this kind of meteoric rise during the 1920s. What accounts for it lasts until the 1960s? What accounts for the decline, and when did the decline of the Book Society begin?
Yeah, so it's very murky. So there isn't an archive per se of the Book Society surviving. So I've done a lot of the research through Publishers Archives, and basically the magazine survives up to the end of the 60s. And what it looks like what's happening is they're kind of becoming less successful. They're increasingly diversifying in the 60s. So they set up a specific kind of history book club, and there's a junior paperbacks club, and these different models. They move away from their premises, which were in Grosvenor Place, kind of very fancy offices in London, and they kind of combine with Bumpus Books towards the end of the 60s, which has also gone through kind of a merger and kind of buyout. So the finances are really precarious. But I think the difficulty is they get themselves into difficulty because they're still giving readers a hardback first edition in the 1960s. So by that point, that's really expensive. And if you waited, so To Kill a Mockingbird was one of the Book Society choices. If you were prepared to wait a year or two, you could get the paperback version for a fraction of the price that the Book Society is doing. So they don't change their model. Also, you've got the Public Libraries Act of 1965, so which gives you a much better public library service. So you're more likely to be able to get, say, the newest fiction or non-fiction in your local public library.
Right.
And I think another factor is like the end of kind of what we say, the end of empire. So this idea of it looks as though about 30 to 40% of members were based kind of overseas, outside England. So I guess in kind of the global politics is shifting post Second World War, you've got some people kind of who would have been based overseas returning back to the UK. And I think that overseas membership has probably dropped off as well.
Right.
But their last choice is one of Iris Murdoch's books. So they're still trying to, kind of give people kind of quite interesting literary reads.
Yeah. And I would imagine the impact of radio and television probably not so much radio because it's it began in the infancy of the birth of radio, but television I would imagine has some overall effect.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yes, yeah. More competition for media in your leisure time and what you might be choosing to spend idea of time and money on. Absolutely, yeah.
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 And I'm kind of curious, where did the curiosity from yourself begin with the project?
Yeah.
How does one write a book about book societies?
Yeah, so I work at the University of Reading, where we've got lots of Publishers Archives, and I was working in the archives of the Hogarth Press, which is Leonard and Virginia Woolf's publishing house, which they set up in 1917. And I guess at that point I had various ideas about who the Woolfs were and who they were publishing their texts for. And I came across this folder of letters to and from the Book Society, and at that point I hadn't heard of them, didn't know who they were, and I was just really surprised by how willing the Woolfs were to kind of go along with what the Book Society were asking and demanding. So Virginia Woolf's novel Flush was a Book Society choice, and as was Vita Sackville-West, The Edwardians in 1930, and Hogarth Press agreed to make loads of changes to make sure that they are Book Society choices. So they lengthened Sackville-West, The Edwardians, and kind of got Vanessa Bell to draw more pictures that went in the book. And then with Flush, with Flush that happens. So it's just, it kind of challenged what I thought I knew about that particular period of literary history and kind of modernism. And then once I started to look into it, I realised that the sales were so significant. You could boost sales by 10, 20,000. Publishers of all types were willing to work with them.
Right.
And once I got into the lives of the judges and started finding out about who they were and looking at the diaries and letters, I then kind of thought, I'm going to tell this story through their lives and their kind of communications. And so yeah, there's lots of affairs and various kind of dramatic personal things going on, which then comes through in their Book Society reviews as well.
And it sounds like the Book Society is.
Are you ready for more independence as a financial advisor? Consider the RIA model. Schwab Advisor Services has helped thousands of advisors make the move. To find your path, start with Schwab at advisorservices.schwab.com/paths today.
Lowe's knows you don't want to sacrifice reliability for savings. This July 4th, get up to 40% off select LG appliances and purchase 2 or 3 select major appliances to get an additional 10% off. Save big on LG, America's most reliable line of home appliances at Lowe's. Based on independent reliability surveys 2021 to 2024 and select major appliances as compared to competing manufacturers offering full appliance lines. See associate for more details. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. Exclusions apply. Valid 6/18 through 7/9.
The way that you did kind of discovered it is as just part of this kind of literary ecosystem almost.
So it's significant because it's the first of its kind in the UK. So based on the American Book of the Month Club, but really shakes up basically how the book world is working in the UK at this time.
Yeah.
And then I think it's significant as well because, we call it influencers now, or celebrities who use books to kind of create communities and kind of shared reading tastes. But it's the kind of first of its kind like that. And it's really not well known at all. But there's so many like 20th century classics that are and were Book Society choices. So yeah, To Kill a Mockingbird, Brideshead Revisited, Rebecca. There's like so many titles that are kind of still familiar. And I think partly they're significant. Their fame is because they were selected by the Book Society, which massively increased sales and distribution as well.
Yeah, and it's about that idea of taste, of people wondering, well, what is good, and how do I navigate this, increasingly growing complex world of literary and genre fiction and other sorts of things.
So the ads ran as an aid to the busy reader, it was called. So this idea, you don't necessarily have time to read book reviews or whatever, but it's actually curation is really important, and that's still I think what people look for now with kind of guides to things, isn't it? And celebrity book clubs. And
you got Dua Lipa, apparently that's the inheritor of all of this now, which I think it just kind of warms my heart immensely. It really does.
Someone asked me the other day if Sylvia Lynd you could compare her to someone like Dua Lipa, and it's like, possibly. She was a socialite. She had a massive influence on her contemporaries, but she was a professional book critic first and foremost, but then she was doing this thing to share books more widely, but liked a good party as well, I think, by all accounts.
You have there are kind of literary critics like F.R. Leavis. I think it was the I'm not sure if he was around during the same period.
No, he was. Yeah.
But they are kind of quite stern arbiters of taste, and kind of pretty obnoxious by and large. But I'm saying, if mass culture is garbage, there are certain things that are immutable classics, and that's the only culture and taste that's good. But obviously, the 20th century is the century of mass culture, which is a whole other debate. But do things like the Book Society operate kind of almost completely opposite to these kind of cultural gatekeepers? Does it do something totally?
They're tied up in it. So in Q.D. Leavis's Fiction and the Reading Public, so she was the wife of F.R. Leavis, and that book is based on her PhD thesis. It's kind of sociology of reading in the 30s. She's one of the people who criticises the Book Society and says they're dumbing down literature and kind of stratifying tastes, and it's quite mocking of some of the choices. So people like the Leavises weren't happy about it. But I think that kind of snobbery around books kind of remains, because I've I'm an academic, I'm based at a university, but I've tried to write this book in an entertaining kind of narrative-led way. And there was a review in the Spectator the other day saying that I sound like a guest on the One Show, and it's just like, what is that about? What's wrong with that, for one thing? Why can't you talk about books in different ways, in different spaces? It's so that kind of snobbery, I would say, is still really embedded in a lot of literary publishing in the book world. And I think we should challenge it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole reason for talking to people, for doing this podcast in the first place, was I've got a shelf full of what I think are really quite interesting history books that probably not everyone gets to read. I like to explore bits from them, and then have people on to talk about books that they wouldn't normally access. Also, I hate the Spectator, and in my version of the world, it would be banned. But there you go. But anyway, but I absolutely agree that one of the kind of the great progressive trends of the 20th century has been the democratization of culture and literature and art, and people having the ability to access them, negotiate with them, navigate them. Yeah. And sometimes you have shall we say, patricians saying this is good.
Yeah, and people get advice and take, from different places, don't they? So, 10 years, 15 years after the book started to fold, you get kind of Oprah and Richard and Judy and people talk about, books on television. And again, that's just like a different format and a way of sharing. I think that one of the things is, isn't it, that so many books are published, every month, and it kind of is overwhelming. And I know lots, kind of you can go into a bookshop and just not really know where to start. And that's, I think, the role of clubs like this.
Yeah, it's to help people navigate complicated stuff. Well, we must finish in a moment, but firstly, let's do the book a good plug. Is it currently available, or is it sort of awaiting publication date?
Just been published by Holland House Books, so it was published last Thursday. Yeah, so you can get hold of it in any good bookshop or via the publisher's webpage or bookshop.org.
Yeah, absolutely. That was always preempts what I always say. If you can buy it from an independent bookshop, if you can buy it, or if you can't, direct from the publisher. But please don't give large online retailers, of whom we shall not speak, don't give them your money, please don't.
Yeah, I mean, again, we have choices, don't we, as readers or consumers, like who we follow. And I did the launch last week in an independent bookshop because that was really important to me. So and there's been a lot of support. So yeah,
fabulous. And thank you so much for coming on. And so what I'll do is I'll put a link in the notes below, and anyone that wants to grab themselves a copy of the book, please do. And Nicola, it was so lovely to chat today.
Okay, well, thanks so much for your time.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
You're very welcome.